With all story DLCs released, plus a free content update with a new game mode and a long-term progression system, and more importantly after a big rebalancing reacting to player feedback, I thought it would be nice to look back at Remnant 2 roughly 1.5 years after its initial release. I want to recap what has been added, if the DLCs are worth getting, how the new free content affects the game, and ultimately, what makes this game special in my opinion, and will we see more of this kind of game in the future? So Remnant 2 sells for $50 and is what I would like to call a AA plus game. The studio certainly does not have the manpower or budget of a AAA studio, but it is also not super small. They started with around 50 devs on Remnant 2 and doubled in size since then. It was one of the first big games released with the Unreal 5 engine, and that shows. Apart from the really phenomenal art style, the level of detail, lighting and really anything about the visual fidelity of this game is top-notch. It does come with some very occasional loading stutters, but with over a year of optimization and patches, I only encounter them rarely. Your mileage may vary depending on your personal system. The gameplay loop is a unique blend of an RPG third-person shooter with Souls-like elements and a heavy emphasis on cool boss fights. One story playthrough will let you experience maybe 20% of the available content. Remnant 2's core feature are the randomized dungeons, events and storylines you can encounter per overarching biome, of which you have 3 main ones plus 2 smaller areas. The latter do not feature a procedural generated layout and are always the same. The playtime for one full story playthrough is maybe up to 20 hours, and then you haven't even started to grind for specific gear, unlocked all classes, leveled those up, hunted down all the hidden treasures and solved all the puzzles. Replayability and exploration are huge and, well, part of the experience, a bit like in a roguelike game. You will usually get well over 100 hours just out of the base game. The 3 DLCs cost $10 each or $20 in total if you buy the deluxe edition. Each DLC offers one big expansion for each major story biome, a new class, tons of new gear, secrets and a conclusion or addition to the existing storylines. The post-apocalyptic setting and atmosphere of the game is really outstanding, but due to its environmental and zone-specific randomized story, the overarching main story is more a foundation for the overall experience and delivers context to the player. You won't play this game for the story, but for the addictive gameplay, the cool setting and the vibes. At this price point, each DLC is well worth it, maybe 10 hours each of pure game time, but then the new dungeons and locations will get shuffled into the randomized content, so each one adds a lot of variety, new enemy types and so on for each subsequent campaign playthrough. In addition, each DLC class is very unique and the additional loot keeps the game rewarding. Everyone has its favorite zone and class, but all DLCs offer great value in my opinion. With the last story DLC, the base game also received a free content update, the boss rush mode and the prism system. The latter initially planned as a long-term optional grind mechanic. But the thing is, if you offer people very powerful options to strengthen your character, everyone wants it and wants it as soon as possible. So a lot of people were unhappy how grindy the prism system was, how RNG based and how non-flexible it was. After 2 big balance patches, the XP requirements have been massively reduced and you can reset the prisms early on, plus resetting the final legendary abilities on their own. It is a lot less grindy and it is now much easier to create your perfect prism. The devs really took the feedback serious and implemented massive changes. The system itself is a little over-engineered in my opinion. Maybe they had some German devs working on it, and I sometimes think a simpler solution like being able to acquire more trade points would have done the job too. Not that the system is bad, but in regards on how powerful you can now become, I feel it contradicts a bit the original idea of the game of being a hard to overcome, sometimes Souls-like challenge. But it is free additional and optional content, so really hard to complain about it. If you enjoy overpowering the game with a truly badass build, the Prism system will let you do that. The Boss Rush mode is a cool way to grind XP fast and focuses mainly on boss fights with some short in-between phases. Again, I think it's not a bad mode, it is free, optional, and after a few story playthroughs, it is nice to directly challenge some bosses without going through a lot of the same content over and over again. It is a fast-paced grind mode at its core, and I think Remnant 2 is at its best when you get this feeling of embarking onto an adventure. And the new mode does not really scratch this specific itch. That's why a lot of people had hoped for a survival-like mode similar to the first game. Now that old survival mode was never very good in my opinion. You could not save during a run, there were no overarching progression systems at work, and the increasing difficulty based on time spent was never my cup of tea. But it had this feeling of a fresh adventure every time, plus this zero to hero build-up loop that people, including me, enjoyed very much. So a more fleshed out survival mode in the veins of Returnal or a PvE extraction shooter setup with accumulating gear from your runs and losing your current kit on death would work extremely well on the foundations of the base game in my opinion. And I would gladly pay money for such an addition to the game. Boss Rush in itself is fine, and I guess much easier to implement than a survival or extraction based system. And again, it is free and optional, so I do not complain about the mode, but it will not satisfy your craving for a survival-like game mode. Now, will we ever see more DLCs for Remnant 2? At this point, the officially announced DLC cycle is concluded, but with the game being a commercial success, I do hope they decide to add more content and specifically a new game mode. Gunfire Games' next big thing will be a new entry in the Darksider franchise, and I doubt they will not capitalize on the Remnant 2 success story and go for Remnant 3, but that would be some years away right now. With all the big failures of AAA games in 2024, or alternatively releases with as much play-it-safe features and lack of innovation, like Dragon Age Veilguard, as possible, AA games become more and more the backbone of the gaming industry. Here you will find new cool IPs to be born, like Remnant or Everspace, and games that embrace a niche and bring a lot of innovation into the market, like Forever Winter, for example. AAA games have immense structural problems, which might become their own downfall. The budgets are so huge that a failure may ruin even big publishers. As a consequence, they will take less and less risks and try to rely on what has worked in the past, leading to a lack of innovation and streamlined try-to-be-for-everyone products. And as the Helldivers 2 CEO once said, a game for everyone is a game for no one. The other huge problem are the absurd development times. The thing that was en vogue when production started has often long vanished in a dynamic and ever-evolving video game landscape. The products will hit the market when that type of game is no longer in demand, or other titles have already saturated this particular trend. And AA games like Helldivers, Everspace or Remnant have reached production values in terms of visual fidelity and available content that easily rivals big AAA productions, with a fraction of the costs and development time. Remnant 2's legacy will be its huge innovation on the RPG shooter formula. The combination of high-quality procedural and handcrafted content with randomized events, dungeons and bosses injected differently into each playthrough. And the slower-paced gameplay with a huge focus on Souls-like boss fights is a nice alternative to all the RPG horde shooters which focus more on mass shootouts like Space Marines, Helldivers or World War Z, which are all very good games on their own. We also have no microtransactions, live service crap, or really any gated and paid for content to deal with. So I couldn't care less for the next big AAA releases like Assassin's Creed, Far Cry or Elder Scrolls, but will be very excited to see what games like Stalker 2 or Atomfall will have to offer. And that shift towards AA games is also a legacy of Remnant 2 and similar titles. What do you think about the gaming industry at the moment? Are we at a turning point where AAA productions are no longer the main appeal or driving factor in the market? And what would you like to see added to Remnant 2 and which AA games are you excited about? Let us know in the comments. For now, this is all about Remnant 2, and thank you very much for watching this video to the end. Take good care of yourself and enjoy your gaming sessions.